right, welcome back to the Word for the Valley podcast. I'll be your host. My name is Jordan, and we've been following along with Pastor Mike as he teaches in depth through the book of Matthew. Now, we were looking at a well-known teaching from Jesus known as the Sermon on the Mount. And Pastor Mike has been covering the blessed statements, commonly referred to as the Beatitudes. And these are attitudes of a state of being. And they're not just things that people do, but they are things that the people of God will become. Let's follow along with Pastor Mike as he picks up in his study at chapter 5, verse 7.
Verse 7 then says, "The blessed are the merciful." Now, merciful literally means throughout the scriptures, it means not doing what somebody else deserves to be done to them. Not exacting full justice or vengeance on somebody else. If they did you wrong, they hurt you in some ways, or they didn't repay in the right kind, to kind of let it go. You know, love covers a multitude of sins. To let it go is mercy. And he says here now, for the merciful, they shall obtain mercy. Jesus will say this later in chapter 7, "Judge not, lest you be judged, for with what measure you judge, it will be measured unto you again." It's certainly not, it's not Buddhism. It's not weird karma, right? It's what people do with this kind of stuff. It's karma, man. It's not karma, right? But it is a rule nonetheless that if you treat people harshly, when you need mercy, you're probably not going to get any. Right? Just kind of the way it goes. But if you extend mercy, even for a while, people may walk on you, trample upon that mercy, and may use it in all of the wrong ways. But the likelihood of getting a little bit of mercy later when you need it will be much higher if you grant mercy. Right? The rule of thumb, by the way, and this is a Chuck Smithism, the rule of thumb, by the way, in all of life is if you need to err, you err on the side of grace. If you don't know exactly what's happening, just issue grace. You don't know why they did that, just issue grace. Why did they say that? Why didn't they respond this way? Why didn't they treat me like this? Why did nobody recognize my beautiful new shirt? Right? Just issue, yeah, it's funny, isn't it? Just issue grace. Just be gracious, right? Assume the positive. This is one of the great kind of rules in all of life and relationship. Just assume that the people, especially the people that are closest to you in life, just assume that they're not trying to hurt you. Some people get hurt by everything. You can't do anything nice for them, right? Everything hurts. Because there's an assumption that they've made that people are out to get me. And you'll find you'll end up sabotaging your own relationships. Instead, issue mercy. Assume the other side. Assume that they're trying to do the right thing. They're just not quite as smart as maybe they thought they were or something. You know, kind of they didn't get it, you know. And listen, which of us doesn't need a little bit of that mercy at times? Right? All the Lord has to do in my life is review a few situations, a few times in my life where I messed up royally. I did this one thing once. I was actually on a missions trip. And so I thought I was being very spiritual, where I kind of rejected an offer of grace because it seemed to me a little bit wonky, right? The girl was going to do this thing for you and kind of like, and it just, I don't know. It made me feel weird, right? And so I thought, I'm going to be spiritual and kind of be above board. I don't want no representation of evil or lust or anything. And so I just kind of pulled away from the whole thing, and I wouldn't let her do her ceremony and this kind of thing. And she was offended and then couldn't hear the gospel presentation that we gave when we were done. I hate that I did that. I thought I was being right. I thought I was being spiritual. I was just being stupid or arrogant. But who of us hasn't, even out of good intentions at times, done something that we look back on and just say, why did I even do that? I was thinking completely the wrong way. And we need mercy then too. So if you recognize that you need mercy, you should probably give some. Verse 8 then says, "Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God." The blessed are the pure in heart. Now, when you read this, don't automatically say that you're out, okay? Pure here literally means all of one substance. That's what the word pure in the Bible means, by the way, right? You can literally have pure gold, meaning that all of the gold in that container is all 100% gold. It doesn't have impurities in it. But you can also have pure uranium, or you can also have pure iron, and probably to some degree, you can have pure dirt. That just means there's no gold in it, right? It's just all dirt. It's all impurity. So whatever it is, it's all of that one substance. And here, what Jesus is saying is that those who kind of uniformly, purposefully make God their one thing, that in fact they will see him. They will get to know him. He will manifest himself to them. I heard my dad say this probably hundreds of times growing up in my life. He would say, Michael, you can have anything you want in life. You just can't have everything you want in life. You may have to pick or choose a little bit what you're aiming for. You can have anything you want in life. And listen, in all of our lives, in our walks with the Lord, you can have as close a relationship to God as you want. And it's probably up to you. Because his arms are extended anyway. And he will draw near and he will grow in us as we're willing to let him. But it's really primarily dependent on whether or not he is in fact our one thing. If he's our one thing, we'll see him. He'll grant us him and himself. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. Live long enough, the other stuff proves out to be failure. Right? I think when you're young, you have all these dreams and hopes, and I need this, and I need this, and I need this, and eventually you realize, well, that didn't help, and that doesn't work, and this doesn't work, and this doesn't work, and this, and you realize after a little while that life kind of gets fairly narrow, or at least probably it should in some ways, and that this is the direction I want to go, and this is what I care about, right? Because on that hospital bed, none of that other stuff matters. This is where we're going anyway, so we might as well learn this now. Set our heart and our mind in that direction straight away. Blessed are the pure in heart. They shall see God. Then, verse 9, the blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called sons of God. Now, if God is a peacemaker, then if we are peacemakers, we then take on his image and reflect his character, and we'll be called sons of God. Now, peacemakers here are not those who are good at sweeping problems under the rug. That's not peace. That's avoidance. And it usually just makes a big pile in the room, right? It's an elephant, but it's well under the rug, right? But it doesn't really do anything at all. A genuine peacemaker are those who know how to lead through situations to actually bring a resolution on the backside where everybody is generally in a peaceful place. It can be moved forward in the things of the Lord. So blessed are the peacemakers, right? Now, to be a peacemaker, what you can't be is somebody who has a vested interest in the peace, right? If you're trying to manage a situation, we all know this in all of our lives, right? To objectively manage somebody else's problem is so much easier than trying to figure out why the person at Wendy's didn't give me my full order, right? Or why I got shorted. Why did they cut me out in traffic? Like we could drive down the road and see hundreds of people cut out, hundreds of crazy drivers, and you're like, oh, that's too bad for them. Or I hope the cop shows up. You know, like all these kinds of things. Somebody cuts in front of us, and we're like, justice. You know, like kill them all, just kind of thing, and just you know. When it's subjectively affecting us, it's really hard to maintain objectivity. And so, especially when it deals with our own needs, our own desires, our own wants, our own areas of responsibility, to kind of get our place where we're settled to say, this might actually end up very badly for me, but it's actually going to be very good for all of us. So I will prefer this solution that grants peace, even if it hurts me. That is the degree of peacemaking that he's talking about here. Blessed are the peacemakers. Verse 10, the blessed are those who are persecuted for righteousness' sake, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Now, he'll expand on this one a little bit in verses 11 and 12, and maybe because of the reactions that he'd be getting from his disciples as he says this? I mean, for most of us, Damien Kyle says this and has said this a lot recently in his teachings. Wouldn't it be nice to be able to read the Bible for the first time? The first time, every time? And to have it kind of hit you across the face? And you're like, what? That's in the Bible? What are we talking about? Jesus doesn't know what he's talking about. What's going on here? And just to have it kind of stun us. Well, this is one of those verses that should do that, right? Blessed are those who are persecuted for righteousness' sake, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. The Egyptian martyrs had their heads cut off, more blessed than we. How do you account for that? How do you recognize that? But this is what Jesus is in fact saying. And he expands on it in verse 11 by saying, blessed are you, look, when they revile and persecute you. Revile means that they speak badly about you. And this is well before Facebook and Twitter and Instagram and Snapchat and all the other means by which you can have all these keyboard jockeys that can change the world from their mother's basement, kind of thing, telling everybody else how to live life and, whatever, and don't even know how to pay their own bills and just mocking. If you train for 6 months like Simone Biles trains, then maybe you can criticize her. But just try a week in her shoes, right? I think we know better. It's just stupid, right? I may not like it. I wish he would have won the gold and the other girl would have won the silver. But who cares for me? She's got her own things to work through, and maybe God bless her in it. But to sit back this is what happens. Those who put themselves out there, those who try and then fail, and if you try enough, you're going to fail. Right? Every athlete eventually retires. You know why? Because they're going to lose, and they know it before they even get started. Right? So rather than looking stupid, they just retire, which is the way it goes. But if you put yourself out there, you're going to fail, you're going to make a mistake, right? And as a Christian, you try. You speak God's words. You hold the lines. You issue truth that even you yourself have a hard time living up to. Love your neighbor as yourself. It's a good rule. Someday I'll try it. Someday I'll get there. I'm working on it. Come on, stop. People can evaluate our lives and poke holes and what's wrong with that person? What are they doing? And it happens all over the place. And somehow or another, they feel like it vindicates their unbelief to see a Christian not meet the standards that are impossible for any human to meet. It's just the way the enemy works this. So don't be surprised, right? Don't be surprised. He says, when they revile and persecute you, don't be surprised by it. It's a when, it's not an if. You live enough like Jesus, you're going to get beat up. It's just the way it goes. It's part of the deal. We all say we want to live like Jesus, and then we get mocked and ridiculed and, threatened with a cross. And we're like, whoa, that's a little bit too much. I like to live like Jesus, but in the miracle side of it, right? I want the good stuff. I don't want that stuff. The persecution stuff, I don't like that stuff. The whole thing is the life of Christ. It goes together. You cannot pick and choose here. And blessed are you when they revile and persecute you and say all kinds of evil against you falsely. Now look, for my sake. I knew a group of kids years ago. This is back when we were very daring and reckless and somewhat ignorant and obnoxious. A group of us would get together and we would do different things, outreach things, sharing the gospel. We'd go do different things. And this one group of friends, I wasn't involved in at this particular time, where they thought they were going to go and share the gospel in one of the cruising sections of Mifflinburg. I didn't know there was one of those things, but apparently there is a place where people kind of drive around, where they did back then anyway, in Mifflinburg, and they were kind of cruising. And so the kids were going, well, hey, we're going to go share the gospel in the circle of traffic or whatever, the cruising or whatever. We're going to go share the gospel. So they had about 3 or 4 kids, loaded up the trunk, and they drove around and shouting from their truck as they go by, hey, sinners are going to go to hell. And you need to repent and be saved. And Jesus Christ is the only way to heaven. And to the best of their ability, sharing the gospel. Well, they drove around the next time and they started to go again. Hey, sinners are going to go to hell. You need to repent and be saved. And If you follow and believe in Jesus, you're going to go to heaven forever. But if not, you're probably not going to go to heaven, kind of thing. And then the people that were there, started yelling at them. And they drove around the third time. And bottles and cans and stones. And they drove around one more time just for good measure. And then they realized, when we do this again, we're probably not making it out of Mifflinburg. That's a rough day. If you can't survive Mifflinburg, you're in trouble. You really kicked the bee's nest kind of thing. And they came back to our group and they're like, oh yes, look, we were persecuted for righteousness' sake. And I said, nope, you were persecuted for being jerks. When did Jesus ride around in a car and yell at people and threaten them to get saved? If you really wanted to share the gospel with them, you would have gone to them like Jesus did. You would have personally cared for them, served them, and loved them. You turn this into something else. You turn this into something self-serving. And so therefore you got persecuted for it. Learn it. Don't do it again. Right? Follow the Jesus style of evangelism and you'll be persecuted for his sake and not for your own. We shouldn't turn this into some goofy, weird thing to kind of make ourselves feel spiritual. It gets really odd and wonky when people do that. Right? If you're going to walk with Christ and share Christ, then it's going to look like Christ. Right? And when it does, and you're persecuted for it, then he says in verse 12, rejoice. Now here it's literally leap for joy. Yippee! Rejoice and be exceedingly glad. Why? Because you really like getting beat up. Right? Because you're really glad people said bad things about you online. Right? Listen, I know better. I still hate it when people say bad things about me. I know better. I know it doesn't matter. I know in light of eternity, I'll probably never see this person ever again. Probably will never see them before, kind of thing. Right? Who cares? It doesn't matter. I know better. I still don't like it. I still have to deal with it. Right? It doesn't just go away as if it doesn't mean anything. It does mean something. Right? But rather than getting bitter or upset or grumpy about it, what the Lord says here is, use it as a means for enjoyment. This should cause some measure of pleasure or gladness. Now, not because you're masochistic, right? Again, if you want to get beat up, it's not that hard. Go be a jerk. If you want to be treated poorly, it's not hard to be treated poorly. Go yell at the person at Wendy's serving your meal. No, don't do that. You don't know what's happening behind the counter, all right? Never yell at your waitress. She carries your food. Think about it, right? There's just certain people in life you don't want to make angry, okay? So just be nice. But here in the Lord, right? To take this, not because we like being persecuted no, because he says, for great is your reward in heaven. For so they persecuted the prophets who were before you. We're getting close to college football season, which I usually like for the first 2 weeks, and then I hate it, and then I like it right at the bowl season again. I don't know why that is about college football, but it's just the way it is, right? And I get excited. Maybe I think the changing of seasons even more than actually college football. And you come around, and now recently in the last probably, 5-10 years, they've had this thing, commercials will start, on the Heisman House, right? If you know college football. And it's a Nissan thing, and they have all these former Heisman Trophy winners, and they all hang out and do goofy things with one another, right? Usually nonsense, right? Wouldn't it be nice to be included in the house as a viable member of the house? That'd be a fun day. It would be a fun day for me, right? I wouldn't mind talking with some of those guys and hearing their stories and just letting them reminisce, right? Bo Jackson could talk forever. I would just listen. Right? To be included in the group. But you know what would happen if I would go to the Heisman House and knock on the front door? Bo Jackson would come to the front door and kindly escort me off of the premises because I don't belong there. I'm not included in the mix. I haven't done what they did. I haven't worked the way they worked. I haven't achieved what they achieved. To benefit from those same benefits, the same result, to being included in the group. There are a lot of people that long to be included in the group. You know, they use, and I do the same thing, right? They use names, Zwingli, Huss, right? Martin Luther. And like, hey, we're in that group. And I would think Martin Luther would be like, I don't know. I think your house is probably down the street some. You know, you're in heaven by the grace of God, you're in heaven. But you'll have no idea what in the world we're talking about here because you haven't done the same things. The beauty of this is that for all of us, not just for an elite few, for all of us, the opportunity of resembling the life of Christ, of doing these things is put before us. If we're willing to turn our back on all of the offerings of the world that come to us as substitutes. And if we're willing to do what the Lord is calling us to do at all cost, we will get all of the same benefits that Peter got, that James got, that John got. We will walk in all of that same reality with all of the same benefits if we're willing to walk the way they walked. The offer is open to all of us. It's the beauty of this. In some ways, all of these things are incredibly impossible. In some ways. In other ways, all of these things could be done by every single person alive on the face of the planet. Isn't it beautiful? He doesn't come to us and says, hey, if you're happy all of the time, right, you're going to be comforted. So you're going to make sure that don't ever be unhappy, because then you'll lose out on the promise. He says, listen, if you mourn, you'll be comforted. You're like, yes, I can do that. I can cry. I've done it before, and I'm going to do it again. And so if it happens, there's a blessing in it, right? Poor in spirit. Who can't be poor in spirit? I can do that. Like, the standard isn't so high. The challenge in some ways is how low it is. Like, oh, I can't do it. I'm out. I can't do it. No, we can all do this. The question in all of this is this, right? Do we prefer the kingdom of heaven or the kingdom of men? It's the only choice made here. Which kingdom do we want to work for? Which kingdom do we want to live for? Which kingdom do we value most? And if you want the kingdom of heaven and are willing to turn your back then on the kingdoms of men, you can have all of the heaven you want, both now and eventually forever in heaven with him, right? The offer is for us, right? And some ways we just have to make that choice.
All right, this concludes Jesus' opening statements describing the people of the kingdom of God. And Pastor Mike reminds us that the opportunity to resemble this type of life is available to all of us. The question is, do we prefer the kingdom of heaven or the kingdom of men? Well, for more teaching from Pastor Mike, check out the teaching archives on our website. There you can find a complete verse-by-verse teaching through the Bible and in-depth studies through the Old and New Testament. Well, thanks for listening to the Word for the Valley podcast. So long, everyone.